Hello everyone, welcome to the another session of generative AI learning. Today I'm trying to make some interesting video on how to become a generative AI architect, right? So our ultimate aim is to become a generative AI architect. So it's not just learning generative AI fundamentals or to become a Gen AI developer or an engineer, but I want us to understand and make sure that we'll become a generative AI architect. We should be digging that level, and we will be definitely will become a generative AI architect. Uh, but before that, we should be make sure that we know a lot of stuff, right? So we should be learning a lot of things, and then we can, you know. Design applications, we can architect generative AI applications and will help a lot of customers. Then we can call ourselves as a generative AI architect, right? So generally, what a Gen AI architect will do is he will understand all the AI capabilities and then he'll make them into a good solution for any business, right? So that's what a generative architect do. But to become a generative AI architect, we need to understand, a lot of things. Like as I mentioned in this slide, at the foundation level, you should understand the AI basics. ML basics, deep learning basics, and generative AI basics, right? So we don't need to learn every AI technology, every ML solution, or you should be very good at deep learning, but we should have some basics of how these things are interrelated and what each one is capable of. So what an AI, what AI is, what is ML, what is deep learning. So that basics we must be having, right? So once we are good with that, then we will understand LLM models, right? Large language models we call. ChatGPT is an LLM model, right? So how this LLM model works and what are the basic, models that we have, which are called as foundation models, right? So how LLMs and these foundation models works, how they get trained by millions and billions of records. So all that basics you should be, good at to call yourself as a Gen AI architect. Then we should understand tokens, embeddings, and context, right? So in simple terms, tokens are the text, the prompt we give. They will be, each word is called as a token. It is as simple as that. And an embedding is a numerical representation of the data, in the sense, so the data that we have, that will be stored, uh, represented as vectors, that is indirectly numbers, and they will be saved in a database called vector databases. And also we should be understanding what is context window, right? So that is another thing that we should be understanding. Then comes the transformers thing. So transformers are one of the core subjects of generative AI. So how this transformer works and what is transformer architectures, what are the fundamentals of transformers, all that we should be, understanding. Then prompt engineering. So next comes the prompt engineering. So prompt engineering again have a lot of topics that we will be discussing in detail in future, right? Next, something called hallucination and model limitations. So this is again, sometimes an LLM can make mistake. So we should be able to understand, what is correct response and incorrect response, and how do we, overcome the limitations of the model, or how can we recognize that a model can do this much only. So all that things we should be having a good understanding, right? So then only we can call ourselves as a Gen AI architect, right? So it's a it's a long journey, definitely, and there should be a lot of learning in the path. So next one, I'm sorry. Next we'll see the Gen AI application engineering. So now we have moved from understanding Gen AI to building the applications, building the stuff with Gen AI. So this one, we start building an uh, working like an AI engineer instead of an AI user, right? So first, we need to understand the programming language. So Python is the best one, because Python is kind of de facto programming language for most of the AI applications, right? We need to understand REST API, JSON. because a lot of stuff for the programming we deal with these things only. So we should understand them, right? So then we should be understanding LLM APIs, streaming, structured output, all these things, and function tool calling, embeddings, vector databases, as I was speaking. So we should be understanding all these things, right? So in this diagram, if you see, the user enters something, and an app or API will call that LLM, and LLM interacts with tools, and it will give the enterprise data. So that's how it works, right? uh, we should be understanding all these different stages, and we should be good at building the embeddings. We should be making we should have good working knowledge of vector databases, how things would work with at each level, right? So as part of this, we should be able to build some a chatbot, or a document summarizer, an AI email assistant, or we can build a coding assistant. So we should be practicing different examples of this kind, so that we will be understanding how this GenAI application engineering works, right? Next comes the very important topic in this journey, that is RAG and AI agents, right? So in simple terms, let's say an organization have lot of documents. So when we give it into a RAG system, so it will differentiate them and make the chunks. It will have make that documents into small things. They are called chunks, and then it will represent them in the numerical base. That is, then they are called as embeddings. And these embeddings will be saved in the vector databases. So whenever we ask a question, it will retrieve, based on the learning, the related information, and it will feed to that LLM. So then, the LLM have an agents, right? So and it will interact with the tools or the APIs, and it will give the result, and it will remember that memory. So that's how this path works. At high level, but we should be having some of the examples, and we should be practicing examples to be make sure that we understood the RAG, the retrieval augment generation, and AI agents well, and we should able to build such a system, right? So that is the aim of during this aim of the learning of RAG and AI agents. Then comes the real stuff. We not only just build the small things, uh, a simple demo, but we will be building a enterprise level applications, right? A production level Gen AI applications. So we should be very good at learning, uh, learning a system, a model, or a Gen AI application that solves lot of people, billions of users at a time, right? So here we should be understanding what is for an application or for a problem in an enterprise, we should able to tell which is the model we should be using, what is the routing technology we should be using, hosting, fine tuning, all these things we should be able to understand. Then the application layer comes, then where we will understand the API endpoints for that application, and what are the agents that can feed into uh, work contact with that application, and what is a RAG systems, what are different workflows, all the things we should be understanding and building. Then document layer, as I'm saying, we have huge amounts of data, and how do we represent them as embeddings, and how do we save them in the vector databases, and how do we define the pipelines for that, right? So that is another thing that we will be building. And then platform layer, that's kind of a deployment layer, so we can define our platform, a cloud, or we can use the container like Docker or Kubernetes or serverless architecture, and we will be building the infrastructure for that. And then comes the most interesting part, the CI/CD, the continuous integration, continuous deployment, where we can seamlessly deploy this solution, and that will be giving the deployment, that will be giving the solutions on the fly, that will make the new feature available to the customer or the final user in seconds. So that kind of operations will be building, and will be monitoring, and checking its performance. So all that we will be building as part of the production Gen AI architecture. Then the last thing, it is the enterprise GenAI architect. So we know we not only just have the GenAI knowledge, but we should be, like a enterprise GenAI architect. So, what does an enterprise GenAI architect needs to understand, right? So, I will divide these things into seven parts. So, first one is models. So, you should understand model selection, model routing, fine tuning, and model hosting, right? Then the second one is data. So, you need to understand RAG, vector databases, knowledge bases, and pipelines. Then is the agents. So you should understand tools, workflows, memory, orchestration, and all that. And then we should understand. Then comes the security. So this is extremely important in the enterprise environments, particularly. So you need to understand identity and access management, IAM, permissions, data privacy, and AI guardrails, right? So next comes the evolution. So how do we know whether our AI application is actually good, right? So we need to measure things like accuracy, relevance, hallucination, safety, and overall response quality. So next comes the operations. So how do we monitor the system? How do we trace an AI request across multiple components? How do we deploy new versions? How do we detect problems? So all that we will be, doing as part of operations. So for last but not least, this is costing. Um, Here we will say like how many tokens are we using, right? Can we cache responses? Can we route simple requests to cheaper models? Can we optimize our architecture? So these are the seven areas we give a very good so when we master the seven areas, so we'll be in a very strong foundation for any gen AI architecture for an enterprise, right? So in summary, so to learn or to become a gen AI architect, so you should be understanding the first LLMs, then an application development, an AI application development, and RAG agents, and then cloud and production architecture, that is a platform, and security and evolution, and finally building the enterprise level architectures, right? So to become an engineer architect, so you should be having all these things. You should master all these things, then you can call yourself as a engineer architect, right? So hope this video helps to understand the stuff that you should learn to become a GenAI architect, right? So thanks everyone.